Community News, and I'm Michael Millen. Our guests today are Chira Cassel.
Hi.
And Dr. Daniel Sheridan from the Children's Bereavement Center. If there ever was a time that children and their parents and their healthcare providers and their surrogates and their mentors need help, this certainly, all right, is a huge time right now between COVID and recently with Surfside,
Yes.
and the grief that we see that is happening across the country sometimes is overwhelming. And at some point, if I start to tear up, just keep talking. All right, we got that.
Sounds good.
All right.
We're comfortable with silence.
Okay, I'm sure you are. So first, why don't you talk about the Children's Bereavement Center, what that is about?
Of course. So the Children's Bereavement Center offers free grief support groups for all ages, starting age 4 through adult. And we have free grief support groups in English and Spanish. Normally, we're in 10 different locations in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. But right now, because of COVID, we are still running our groups online. And so even if you don't live near one of our 10 locations, you could still attend one of our free grief support groups. And they meet every week. They're free. People can come as early or as late after a loss as they would like. And they are run by our incredible clinical team, but they are peer support groups.
And Dr. Sheridan, so tell us about how you got involved in this arena and why at the Children's Bereavement Center.
Sure. Yeah, I think, grief is something we all experience. It's a human part of life. And for me, I came through it through my own experiences of loss throughout my childhood, throughout my adolescence. And I found that it was a really necessary and underserved aspect of mental health. We always think that adults grieve, adults are the ones who deal with loss, but children are grieving. We find that 1 in 5 school-age children before the age of 18 will experience the death of a adult in their life. And historically, they haven't been given that attention, how to talk to a child, how to help them in their grief. And it's really been an underserved population and something that's been really important to me in my personal and professional life.
When did you realize that you wanted to get a terminal degree in this arena?
That's a good question. I think I came about it through a different way. So in school, I studied LGBT mental health, and that was really a focus of mine. And I was looking at the coming out process. And what I came to understand in my both personal and professional life is that there's a lot of grief that can come from coming out, and that grief can affect us all in different ways. And that in each relationship, we have to understand our own relationship with our family and the losses that can come with that. And that what we can learn from a loss, whether it's the death of somebody or losing someone in a relationship, is that we can grow from that, we can understand it, and we can improve ourselves. So it became a personal passion.
At what age was that when you started saying, I want to get a doctorate in this?
Probably, how old was I? Probably early 20s. Yeah.
Well, good for you.
Thank you.
All right. So we know that the grief is not just for people that are experiencing death, all right? Mm-hmm. Moves can cause that, right? The changing of a school,
yes,
not going to school, and we look to, I know you have a wide range of clients, but we look to the students in the last 15 months. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Stay at home with mom, no, don't go. Get a dog as a pet. By the way, speaking of dogs and pets, now Miami-Dade Animal Services has a huge number of pets because people aren't adopting as much as we were. And we know people are returning dogs and cats and birds and things, which is another button that can cause grief. Mm-hmm. How did you get into this arena?
Well, I ended up here because one of the founders of the Children's Bereavement Center is my mother. And, I'm someone who I know that she went into this work as a psychologist because she would see adults in her practice and they'd be grieving. And she also had some personal loss young herself. And she would ask the adults, where are the kids? Where are your kids going? And they'd say nowhere. And so she and another psychologist said, let's start one group. And let's see if there's an interest. And in the first group, there were 8 kids from 5 families. And then at the end of a year, and they almost immediately decided to also do parent groups because it's very important for, when children are grieving. It's not a standalone issue. It's not one person's issue. This is, we say at the CBC that grief is meant to be shared. And social support is the number one factor in someone doing well with grief. So, they started also when the parents do well, the kids do better. So they started an adult group. And in the end of that year, starting with 8 kids, they then had 100 kids. So they had sort of hit a nerve. And I, at a young age was given the opportunity to have healthy grief. I was taught and given good support and had open communication when there were deaths in my life. And I saw that was something that was a gift and that helped me in other situations.
So doctor, how do adults who are suffering loss of a child, all right, share that the sibling can share with the adult? How does a child or a parent learn how to open that door so that it's a healthy relationship?
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of practice. Those kind of conversations, they're the really big conversations. They're the uncomfortable ones. And what's most important in any of those big conversations is that you're honest. You never want to lie to a child. You always want to be the truthful, but you also don't want to overwhelm them with information. You don't want to scare them. So it's really trying to navigate those two realms of honesty without giving them too much information. And it's something that our support groups often help our participants, our adult participants who have children, of how do I talk to my kids? And we can offer each other an experience of adults who have already had that conversation, that they can share ideas with each other of, this is what worked for me, and this didn't really work too well, and maybe you can think about it this way. So we help each other out. But it's something that takes practice, and it's something that it's never a one-time conversation. These conversations continue to happen. And from that, it strengthens the family. People become closer and more intimate because they know how to talk about difficult subjects.
Personal experience for me, I had a younger brother that died when I was 17, 18, and nobody talked about it. Not a word. And so here it is many years later, I still grieve that moment as I speak about it. Well, what was wrong in the unit that there was no conversation? And you never know whether the parents don't bring it up because they don't want, they're not sure what to do, or whether they feel as though the child doesn't want to bring that up. So how can a person that's really not involved, there's no deaths recently in there, what is it that they can do to sort of prep themselves for that moment when that grief happens? Because we just saw at Surfside, there are thousands of people that are literally affected by that. So what is it that somebody could do to find out a little bit more how to respond to their family when something like that happens?
Well, I think there's, one of the things that we try to do is have a lot of education around grief. When there are deaths that happen, maybe not in your own family, and that that your child is privy to that information, right? They pick up your phone to play games on it. They have access to news. Kids hear and experience more than many adults give them credit for. So one thing is to establish open lines of communication about all topics, right? There's nothing too big or too small or too awkward or too hard to talk about. Some of that is also modeling for your child, having those open communications. Part of what Dan said, many adults come to our groups to figure out how to support their child when their family is grieving, but many of them realize that they need it themselves. And it's never too late to get grief support. There are people who come to us many years later because, like you just spoke about, it's pretty common that people didn't have open communication. And then the other thing is we try to do a lot of education. That's what we do. We train over 10,000 professionals in a year, everyone from the mental health counselors in the public schools and principals and teachers, those who work in healthcare systems, doctors and nurses, to have how to have educated, conversations that are healthy, that, what phrases to say, what not to say, and to sort of empower adults so that, because part of it is just getting comfortable for yourself. If you can be comfortable with talking about difficult topics, then that gets modeled for your child. And also that's something that becomes a habit, and they learn to navigate that.
You bring up a really good point. And doctor, so the saying is to get comfortable talking about uncomfortable things, right?
Yeah.
And we look at the students who thought they were in the clear, and they're going back in September and wear a mask. No, don't wear a mask. And now there's a fight in Tallahassee, a fight in Washington, and fight everywhere. Each one of those events can cause grief for everybody, not just for the students, all right? But they are certainly the most vulnerable in the sense of they have their whole life in front of them. So what is a parent supposed to do when they go, listen, this stuff is happening, and they know about it? So what should they do as far as getting that child to open up? Specifically, what could they do? If somebody's watching and they ask you, listen, this is what's going on. My kids, I don't see anything that's going on with them, but I know it must be.
Yes. I think, first of all, if a child or a teenager isn't speaking about it, it doesn't mean they don't want to talk about it. And I think that's an important differentiation, that they might not know how to begin this conversation. And what we do partly in our work is that we want to educate people to take the initiative to talk to the person who's grieving, whether it's a child all the way up to an adult, because many people don't know how to have these conversations and they're afraid to. They worry, am I going to make this person uncomfortable, or am I going to upset them if I speak about it? So we empower people to, go to them, ask them, how are you feeling about this? What's been on your mind lately? Just open the door. And sometimes people want to walk through it and sometimes they don't. And that's fine. You meet them where they're at, but you always let them know, listen, if you ever want to talk, I'm here, and I'm curious, and I want to know how you're doing.
Is there any gender relationship to being open enough, to be sensitive enough to go to a spouse, a child, and have that conversation? Is there one gender that's more likely to do it than others, or is it just the type of personality?
Gender as the adult, or gender of the
as a big macho guy, right? I don't talk about silly things like death and grief. I lost my arm or my leg, so we're just not going to bring it up because, right?
Yeah.
So is there a connection that one sex is more likely to behave a certain way?
I would say traditional gender norms, you would expect, a woman to be more emotionally, open to talking about these things, but sometimes the biggest macho men are teddy bears at heart. And to keep that in mind, that sometimes it can be so comforting, it can be so relieving to have the macho guy, talk about feelings and open up that conversation. It can be so healing, and we love when that happens. And we really value our male facilitators who come in because they offer a whole different perspective, and they really can sort of flip this script that everybody has feelings. We're human. It doesn't matter if we're a man, a woman, everything in between. We're people, and we feel.
So I'm sure that many times you lead groups. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you do that?
I have done it before, yes.
Yes, okay.
Of course.
So what's that like doing that? And you're there and you see the people are talking, maybe some aren't. What's the feeling that you get from that?
Well, in the past when I facilitated, groups, a lot of time people say, what are the groups like? And it is something that's very difficult to explain, right? What is happening? Because there's so much that's happening in a group. Some weeks in a group can be really hard. There can be, a range of emotions. There can be anger. There can be crying. There can be disappointment. There can be shame. There's also weeks where there can be levity in the room, where people can laugh for the first time in a group, where people aren't looking at them and judging them because they're laughing, because they had a moment of joy in their grief. You said it's not always the burly men who sometimes can't open up. There's lots of reasons. Like, I have to be the strong woman, or maybe there's many cultural reasons why people would maybe not open up. So it's a really safe space where people feel comfortable to feel the full range of emotions at the moment that they are feeling them. And, our group doesn't have a curriculum. People come in and speak about what's on their mind that week. They open up to the group and people give them suggestions. Other people, one of the things that was the most eye-opening to me in group is to see two different people with two completely different losses. And the death circumstances were completely different, the relationship to the person. And those two people were very different. But this one young woman heard another man voice what he had been thinking for weeks and weeks, what was tormenting him. And she was streaming down tears. And she said, for the first time in weeks, I haven't felt crazy. It's not just me who's feeling these strong feelings and having these thoughts that I'm not sure if I should be having. And so it lets people know that it's okay to have the full range of emotions, and that, to have more self-compassion for themselves. And it also, in a group, you gain perspective, which is another beautiful part. In our groups, there's not a start date and an end date that's kind of predetermined.
So there's some guy, he's going to walk into a room with 15 other people, and he's going to sit there and he's going to listen, and then he's going to start talking about what he's going through. How long does that take to get somebody to move from, I don't know who these people are, I don't care, but maybe I'm going to open up and maybe I'm not?
Sure. Everyone's different. It's so person specific. And what's very important about our groups is we have something called the Ipass Rule, which means if you don't want to talk, you don't have to talk. What's most important for us is that you are not grieving alone, and that you're in a community with other people, listening, connecting. And if you ever want to talk, that's fine. But everyone's grieves differently at different timelines, and we respect that timeline. That's why we offer unlimited sessions. You can come as long as you want. You can stop and you can come back when you want to come back. So we meet people where they are, rather than saying this is where you should be, because there is no should.
So when you go to these groups, you actually have to train yourself to understand the dynamics of the group, right? So you go,
well, we don't just throw you into group. You have an orientation before you come into the group where we explain how the group process will work. You meet your site coordinator, you meet your facilitator, so you know who will be going into the group with you. And we explain sort of a few things about what to expect and a few rules for how to have, a healthy group so that everyone can get what they need.
We know that there are support groups for different types of illnesses. And let's just talk about their cancer support groups. So there is some establishment of that throughout the community. Diabetes support group, Overeaters Anonymous, blah, 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 Weight Watchers groups. So how is somebody going to wind up at that particular group? And is it just how are they going to decide, I'm medical, I'm grieving this, my children are grieving, so I'm going to go to that group with you rather than to a cancer group? So
I guess for our groups, a little bit about the actual format is that it's a peer support group, but it's run by a clinical team. There's always a mental health professional who's in the room. And that's because while it's the peers who are supporting one another, we want to make sure good facilitation is happening, but also if someone needs some additional referral because they need some other kind of support, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be in group, but maybe they also need some additional one-on-one support or something different. So we're always keeping an eye on that because grief changes and people's needs change. So that's one, aspect of deciding. But the other part of that is if you think that grief is your, most prominent issue, right? And you should feel sad when there's a death, right? A lot of people, grief is not a pathology. It's normal. It's healthy. And with some support and some resources, people could really feel supported and feel well, over time. But I think that a lot of people think I need one-on-one, and that's actually, especially for children, group support is best practice. And it allows some other opportunities that one-on-one therapy doesn't always allow.
There is some dynamics that occur when you get in a group that you recognize people in the group have similar issues. I was covering one of the breast cancer run a couple of years ago at Bayside. And I was up front taking pictures, and there, 5,000 people all wearing pink shirts. I just broke down. I was bawling like a baby. And you go, oh my goodness, look at this. And each one of those people know 20 people or 50 people. And I was just so overcome with the intensity of this, but yet in the middle of that, people were there looking for support and to give support for other people. So
we were there. We had a booth. We were giving support. Yeah.
So let's talk about who pays for if somebody wants to join and find out a little bit more about the bereavement group.
So the participants never pay. We do 2 fundraising activities, including we have a 5K, which will be November 13th this year.
November 13th, okay.
At Zoo Miami. And that's, we have our remembrance run that day where people run to remember those who they lost. And also the community comes out to support other grievers in the community. So we have that and another gala. We apply for a lot of grants. And, that's what I'm out doing every day, making sure, because we really believe, in a lot of ways, grief work is upstream work. It's very, very important that people get support. We can't always change all the reasons why deaths are occurring in a community. But you also cannot leave behind the people who are the families that need healing, because that could be another loss. So we have to get people support up front and make sure that we're keeping it free. We're keeping it accessible in communities. And we believe that everyone deserves quality, free grief support. It's a social justice issue. And we saw that this year during COVID.
Yes. We know that the school board's hiring a lot of mental health counselors, right? I'm pretty sure they're going to be pretty busy with that. We were fortunate to speak with Susan Racker, National Alliance for Mental Illness. All right,
Great.
She came in, and her son came in who had some significant issues, and he wrote a song, and he wrote the music, and he sang it. And it was called "You Are Not Alone." And I don't remember the words at all, but what I remember when he was singing, I was imagining him in his worst moment, out on the streets, and the struggle that he was with, and the progress that he was making, and sharing his inner stuff in that song. So, and I got to tell you, I probably mentioned this probably about 20 times because I realized that so many people are still hiding that. And that mental illness, by the way, I used to be a registered nurse. I spent some time working in the Psychiatric Institute a long time ago. And I said to my shrink at the time, I said, the only difference between me and them is I got the keys. He said, Michael, that's a big difference. So it's when we can recognize about ourselves and that we're just human, right? That we need to be able to share that. But still there's a certain persona, I don't need help. But the reality is, in this time frame, the last 15 months, all right, there's so many people that need help. How can somebody take their own temperature, if you will, to say, here we are, maybe we're going to go back to school in the fall, all right? Maybe we're going to go back to work. Maybe we're going to catch it. Maybe we're not. What's a self-diagnosis that they can take a look in the mirror and go, I think you should go and get some help? What are some things that it could or should do?
Sure. Listen to yourself as best you can. Don't put pressure on yourself. Don't put expectations. It's when I think we fill our mind with the shoulds, like I should do this, I should be here, I should be doing this. We get ourselves into trouble because we've all experienced a very, very wild, upheaving 15 months. It's been a very traumatic year and a half, and it's affected each one of us differently and in similar ways and unique ways. And just because you see people going out and doing their things doesn't mean that you should be doing that if you don't feel ready. So listen to yourself, and if something's not feeling right, pay attention to that, respect that feeling, and talk to somebody.
One of the great things that I learned last April is I had somebody come here and do my fingernails. I didn't go to the place. So I took a picture, sent it to my wife. She locked me out of the house for 2 days. She said, "You're not respecting me by doing this." And so we had to lighten it up. So we went to the building, did a video. There's Michael's kitchen. There's this, there's that. But I learned everybody's at a different place, right? And we do, right, have to respect people's positions, whether we agree with. That's not relevant whether we agree, with that. And as I look to the number of interviews that we've done and sharing, a huge percentage have to do with the mental well-being of people right now. And we know it's a gigantic thing that's going to be here. What are you going to be doing for the kids and reaching out to them? Then with any luck, they might say something to the parents. And what are you going to do for the parents so they know, hey, I need to go in, I need to talk to somebody so my family is healthier. So what are you going to do this coming up few months?
So for us, it's outreach, getting the word out about the services we provide and how we're a resource for the South Florida community. And that's just meeting people, letting them know about our services. Our biggest referrals are from the school system and family and friends. It's someone trusted that's saying, I know this organization, maybe this is a good fit for you. And it's just meeting people.
And you have this bubbly personality. It so happens that I know your uncle.
Yes.
He's active in South
Shout
Miami.
out
We
Brad
won't say his
Cassel.
name, Brad.
Yeah.
All right. You come from a long history of Miamians, great Miamians. All right. So that's great.
Thank you.
So what does the Children's Bereavement Center look like in a year from now, 2 years, and 5 years from now?
Well, one of the things I think we've learned this year is we can make plans, and then we have to stay flexible. And that's what we talk about every day in our support groups, that life changes and then you have to figure out, what that new normal is, and how to move forward. So, some things is that our online program, which started based out of necessity in COVID, we're going to be keeping that. So as we roll out at our 10 locations, over the next year to go back in person, we'll keep that online group. It's really opened up, made the groups more accessible to people, and sorry, go ahead. You want to say something? So we're going to continue there. We're going to continue the training that we do, which we saw in this year. Many people called us in crisis, but we're going to continue to train in the schools, at hospitals, at community agencies, so that as adults need to have these hard conversations, and also as they need to deal with their own grief, they have support, they have language, and they know where to go, who to call ahead of time. And then, we're just going to continue to figure out how can we get to more families who are grieving.
You brought up about Zoom. One of the things that people just conveniently forget is talk shows have been doing it that way for 50 years. They have a studio audience, but they're really talking to the other people, which is on a network, right? And so that's certainly one of the things that the pandemic taught us. There's lots of ways to reach people. And one of the things that people do want to know when I walk in, after being interviewed by the administration, if you will, when they walk in there, is this first name only? How does that work? Somebody walks in the room, all right? And they walk in, they go, my name is so-and-so. And here's my problem. How does that usually work for somebody when they walk in?
Into their first support group.
Yes.
So our support groups right now that they're happening online, as I say, you first have an orientation. You're in the room where you get, we make sure that you have a soft landing when you enter, that you already know who's facilitating. And then we usher you into group. And it starts with introductions and everyone says who they lost. And then there's some opening question that a facilitator will ask. And so it gives people sort of a starting place. And then it just works organically from there, right? So that sometimes it's that you hear something that someone else says in group and you have something to add. So sometimes someone won't speak for weeks, but then they have something that might be helpful for someone else. And so they feel the need to speak up because how could they not help that person, right? And that can be really empowering to someone who's been grieving, who maybe felt like they didn't have energy to get through the day. But the other thing is that sometimes it's because somebody, they get comfortable, even in the online groups. We do evaluations and we show that our online groups are just as effective as our in-person groups. And one of the things that the participants, even those who didn't come to an in-person group before, that they started during this year online, they said, I formed very strong bonds with the people in the group. I can't believe that I can have intimate relationships on a computer screen, right? And even when we didn't meet for 1 week, some of our participants decided to meet themselves. That's how important the support and the relationships were to them in their grieving process.
And speaking of grieving, as we are sort of out of the pandemic, is there going to be a grieving process of, hey, I think we're out of that, and I've missed it. I've been involved for 1.5 years with it, and I may not have to anymore. Mm-hmm. What goes on in the brain and the personality of that? I used to wear a mask. I used to do this, and I'm not doing it anymore. Is it safe to go outside? How does that work?
I think it takes time. We got very accustomed to a particular way of life, and it was a particular way of life that was very much about protecting our safety and protecting our well-being. And to take the mask off, whether it's the physical mask or just being more connected with people. It can be some growing pains and some adjustments that can come along the way.
And you bring up something that's very important with masks. I'm a little hard of hearing.
Mhm.
I'm at a hygienist, and I can't, she's wearing everything. And so I figured turn right, turn left. She finally goes, no, the other left, Michael. Okay, all right. And I tell people now, all right,
Mhm.
I can't hear you, all right, because of all the ambient noise. I said, so we either have to speak louder or go to someplace different. And that is it took me a while to be able to say that, all right, because it can get very isolated where you hear this and nothing, or you're watching, nothing comes out. So I know that for me, there was that grief of, okay, you have a hard time hearing. This is the adjustments you need to make in order to do that a little bit better. And of course, the other one was, we'll go get a hearing. Oh, no, I'll struggle through this.
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot of struggles that we're all going to be going through.
Mhm.
And I know young moms have the kids. They've had the kids essentially for a year and a half. And we know what's around the corner come September, all right, or August when they go to drop off the kids, all right, on both sides. So what's a young family, what should the mom and dad do to understand themselves and their child when they go to drop them off to school come August 20th or whatever that is? Doc?
I would say the parents, they may be relieved that they finally have a break, but it's going to be, it could be very scary for the child to go back to school. There could be some separation anxiety that could be, I think, be a very normal experience, that they're going to be 6 to 8 hours without seeing their parents. So they might be upset, they might be scared. And to prepare your child, to let them know this is what the school day is going to look like. We might not be able to talk, but I'll be there. I'll be there when the school day ends, and we'll hang out. I want to hear all about your day, just to reassure them that I'm going to be here afterwards, because they have witnessed a year and a half of people dying.
And as you said, it's that openness that matters, all right, to be able to share that so that everybody sort of gets a picture of the future landscaping.
And modeling, some of it is, a lot of times parents will come to us and say, oh, my kid is very concerned about X, Y, and Z. And it's actually their own concerns.
Mm-hmm.
So address your own concerns. Make sure if you have anxieties, if there are things that you're not sure about, make sure you find out all the answers, get the support you need so that you can support your child and have healthier conversations.
And as we look for the entire world, we got 2 minutes left we've all experienced very similar things for probably the first time in the history of mankind. Did we care? Before it was over there, when it was that country and that country, we didn't care. Well, now it's here, all right, with each of us. And I think that a lot of us are grateful, to be alive and grateful to be healthy. And there's grief in that, in the sense of, oh my God, what did we go through?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of stories as we get a little bit farther, along with us. I want to thank both of you for being here and for being very involved with the community, for taking care of their kids and their parents and their aunts and uncles and the Children's Bereavement Center. They can find you all over the internet,
Yes.
right? And they can reach either one of you. They can reach you.
Yeah, so if you want to join our groups, you can just email support@childbereavement.org, or you can go to childbereavement.org. Also, you can call our 888 number, which is Dan.
888-988-5438.
I also do want to say that, again, we have free support groups for all ages, age 4 through adult, in English and Spanish. And now we also have dedicated Surfside groups for friends and family members who were impacted by the horrible tragedy that just occurred there.
And thank you for that. And Doc, I'd like you to look into a camera. Which camera should he look into? And talk to a young person who's struggling right now, and what should they do? All right, they're struggling with they know that they've got a problem. What do you want them to do?
I want to say you're not alone, and that if you're not feeling okay, call someone, text someone, reach out, and don't go through this by yourself, because there are people in your life who are here for you, who love you, who support you, and want to help you get through this, and that you do not have to go through this alone.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Tommy, thank you for doing this, folks.
Thank you, Tommy.
Have a great day. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Remember, if you have a challenge, please call the Children's Bereavement Center, and you can find them everywhere. Folks, again, thank you.